Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war and US political update where I'm going to talk you through a Wall Street Journal piece that is an absolute must read. It is available on MSN and probably other providers of news because Wall Street Journal's behind a paywall and it's very difficult to get you can't get the archived version of their articles. So I do advise you go and read it. It's a fairly sizable read that is looking at the US approach to doing peace with Ukraine, and it's essentially business as a vehicle for peace, but as also the driver of everything to do with the negotiations. The United States, qua Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff, are not interested one iota in Ukraine getting a just peace. They're not interested in justice. They're not interested in morality. They're interested in business for the United States. And this is very dangerous for Ukraine. This article is doing the rounds at the moment, but lots of people are commenting on it because it is so revealing. What I'm going to do is read you some synopses of the article, and then I'm going to dip into some excerpts. Obviously, it's a sort of 12-minute read, as it says, so I'm not going to sit here and read the whole of the article to you, but we'll pick out some pertinent points. In the meantime, if you haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, and share. It makes a heck of a difference to the channel. I'd appreciate that very much. Okay, let's get into it. So we have here the article, Make Money, Not War, Trump's real plan for peace in Ukraine. Before we dip into the article firsthand, let's go to Chris Owicki as a summary. The Wall Street Journal reports that the main focus of the US-Russia peace talks is to get a commercial advantage for American companies and personal benefits for individuals linked to the Trump administration. So straight away, it looks like there's potential for corruption here and people lining their own pockets, grifting off the back of peace. Russia is seen as just an opportunity to make money for people associated with the Trump administration. And we've already seen the extortion that was attempted with the initial iteration of the minerals deal that that Trump wanted from Ukraine. Ukraine eventually agreed to a minerals deal, but they had to work really hard to renegotiate it, and in the end it was okay, I believe, for Ukraine. So they brought that into motion, and actually it's done absolutely nothing to stop the war at all. So all really the Trump administration wanted from that minerals deal was business with Ukraine, and they didn't care whether it's facilitated peace or not. The European officials are said to be shocked by the plans. According to the Wall Street Journal, talks between Trump's golfing friend Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev have bypassed the US national security and diplomatic apparatuses to focus on economic benefits for well-connected American companies. The paper reports that, quote, a cast of businessmen close to the Trump administration have been looking to position themselves as new economic links between the US and Russia. Friends of the Trump family and the Trump donors are working on lucrative deals with Russian companies. Anticipating the removal of sanctions, Gentry Beach, a Trump donor and a college friend of Donald Trump Jr., has been in talks to acquire 9.9% of an Arctic liquid natural gas project with the Russian company Novatek. Other businessmen have been involved in similar talks. They include executives from ExxonMobil, mining companies, and investment funds, which have been offered stakes in Russian energy production, mines, and pipelines. Rare earth production has been a particular focus of interest, as well as gas concessions in the Sea of Okhotsk. The rest of the US diplomatic and national security apparatus, including the State Department and the CIA, is said to have been kept in the dark. US Treasury officials reportedly only learned about the details of Witkoff's meetings from their British counterparts. Wow. Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, is reported to have been, quote, all but frozen out of serious talks, and is leaving his post in January 2026. According to the Wall Street Journal, quote, in the days after the Alaska peace talks in August 2025, a European intelligence agency distributed a hard copy report in a manila envelope to some of the continent's most senior national security officials who were shocked by the contents. These efforts, end quote, these efforts have not been yet successful. The Alaska summit fell apart after Putin angered Trump by lecturing him on Russia's historic right to control Ukraine and ended without agreement. In October, Witkoff and Putin appear between them to have persuaded Trump to reject Zelensky's plea to acquire Tomahawk cruise missiles to attack Russian refineries. Witkoff suggested that the Ukrainians should ask for a 10-year tariff exemption instead. So the idea is that Ukraine should want a 10-year exemption from tariffs, like looking forward after the war to business deals with the US and saying, well, you're going to tariff us, so we would like in the future 10 years of tariff exemptions rather than a bunch of Tomahawk missiles, because future tariff exemptions are going to win them the war right now kinetically on the battlefield. It's utter ridiculousness. Now, I just put the article in just for your benefit into here, Microsoft's Copilot AI, just to give you a summary, so we don't have to read the whole thing, but I am going to go back and read some of it. Summary: the article describes how Donald Trump's approach to ending the war in Ukraine is centered less on traditional diplomacy and more on business deals. His team, including allies like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, has engaged with Russian negotiators to explore economic partnerships such as tapping frozen Russian assets, Arctic mineral projects, and energy ventures as a way to incentivize peace. Critics argued the plan prioritizes commercial interests over Ukraine's sovereignty, with European leaders warning it rewards Russia despite its aggression. So key points from the article: business-driven peace plan. Trump's envoys and business associates are working with Kirill Dmitriev, head of Russia's sovereign wealth fund, on proposals that would link US companies with Russian ventures, including rare earth mining and Arctic energy projects. Frozen assets. A central idea is to use the $300 billion in Russian central bank assets in Europe for joint US-Russian investment projects and Ukraine's reconstruction. Commercial incentives. The plan envisions US firms leading to post-war reconstruction and exploiting Russia's vast resources, with the belief that shared prosperity could prevent future conflicts. European pushback. Leaders in Europe and Ukraine criticized the leaked 28-point peace plan, saying it largely reflected Russian interests and ignored Kiev's red lines. Poland's prime minister summarized it as, quote, "We know this is not about peace, it's about business." That is the key to this whole thing. It's not about peace, it's about business. Trump's philosophy, consistent with his long-held view, Trump sees borders and geopolitics as secondary to economic opportunity, echoing his past offers to build Trump Tower in Moscow during the Cold War. Potential deals. US companies like ExxonMobil and investors close to Trump have already explored opportunities in Russian energy projects, pipelines, and rare earth mining contingent on sanctions relief. And diplomatic concerns. Traditional US agencies like the CIA and State Department were sometimes sidelined, learning of negotiations indirectly. This raised concerns among allies about transparency and whether Putin is using business overtures to prolong the war. So the bottom line is that Trump's make money, not war plan frames peace in Ukraine as an economic partnership between the US and Russia. So Ukraine doesn't really feature, right? While it could open lucrative opportunities for American businesses, critics warn it risks undermining Ukraine's sovereignty and rewarding Russian aggression. The central tension is whether economic incentives can genuinely secure peace or whether they serve Moscow's strategic interests. And I would answer that with it would just benefit Russia and the US. Ukraine is not considered one iota here. Right. So we're going to come down to a few areas of the article later. So easy to read all of it, isn't it? For the Kremlin, the Miami talks, so between Kirill Dmitriev, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff, were the culmination of a strategy hatched before Trump's inauguration to bypass the traditional US national security apparatus and convince the administration to view Russia not as a military threat, but as a land of bountiful opportunity, according to Western security officials. By dangling multi-billion-dollar rare earth and energy deals, Moscow could reshape the economic map of Europe, or driving a wedge between America and its traditional allies. Dmitriev, who is a Goldman Sachs alumnus, had found receptive partners in Witkoff, Trump's longtime golfing partner, and Kushner, whose investment fund Affinity Partners drew billion-dollar investments from the Arab monarchies, whose conflict with Israel he had helped mediate. The two businessmen shared President Trump's long-held approach to geopolitics. If generations of diplomats viewed the post-Soviet challenges of Eastern Europe as a Gordian knot to be painstakingly unraveled, the president envisioned an easy fix. The borders matter less than the business. In the 1980s, he had offered to personally negotiate a swift end to the Cold War while building what he told Soviet diplomats would be a Trump Tower across the street from the Kremlin, with their communist regime as a business partner. Quote, Russia has so many vast resources, vast expanses of land, Witkov told the Wall Street Journal, describing at length his hopes that Russia, Ukraine, and America would all become business partners. Quote, if we do all that and everybody's prospering and they're all a part of it, and there's an upside for everybody, that's going to naturally be a bulwark against future conflicts there because everybody's thriving. Like, this is like, imagine, it's like saying, this person has just graped you. Well, how about you go into business with them and then everyone's going to be happy? Hang on, they've just graped me. And that is entirely inappropriate for me to just go, oh, all is fine. Let's go into business as partners. It's utterly ridiculous. Like, Ukraine has been violently violated by Russia. And here Witkov is saying, well, if we all just went into business together, and that includes the US, by the way, because we're just going to make some money, then all will be fine. Everyone will be thriving. It's so not even short-sighted. It's just completely lacking in empathy. When a version of the 28-point peace plan leaked earlier this month, it drew immediate protests, etc., etc., etc. Okay, it's about, Russia, after violently redrawing European borders, was being rewarded with commercial opportunities. Okay. And I think Donald Tusk, his summary, we know this is not about peace, it's about business, is absolutely on point. So another part here, for many in the Trump White House, the blurring of business and geopolitics is a feature, not a bug. Key presidential advisors see an opportunity for American investors to snap up lucrative deals in the new post-war Russia and become the commercial guarantors of peace. In conversations with Witkoff and Kushner, Russia has been clear it would prefer US businesses to step in, not rivals from European states whose leaders have, quote, talked a lot of trash about the peace efforts. One of these people said, quote, it's Trump's art of the deal to say, look, I'm settling this thing and there's huge economic benefits for doing that for America, right? A question for history will be whether Putin entertained this approach in the interest of ending the war or as a ploy to pacify the US while prolonging a conflict he believes is his place in history to slowly, ineluctably win. I think that's a really, really important paragraph, so much so that I'm going to read it again. A question for history will be whether Putin entertained this approach in the interest of ending the war. So does Putin care about ending the war, and that's why he wants to do these business deals? Or is he using these business deals as a ploy to pacify the US, to allow him to just delay, and prolong a conflict that he believes he's inevitably going to win? That is such an important point there. So then we can go and talk about different examples of how US entities are meeting with Russia and looking to profit. Earlier this year, ExxonMobil met with Russia's biggest state energy company, Rosneft, to discuss returning to the massive Sakhalin gas project if Moscow and Washington gave the green light. Elsewhere, cluster businessmen close to the Trump administration have been looking to position themselves as a new economic links between the US and Russia. Gentry Beach, a college friend of Donald Trump Jr. and campaign donor to his father, has been in talks to acquire a stake in the Russian Arctic gas project if it is released from sanctions. Another Trump donor, Stephen P. Lynch, paid $600,000 this year to a lobbyist close to Trump Jr., who is helping him seek a Treasury Department license to buy the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from the Russian state-owned company. There is no evidence that Witkoff, the White House, or Kushner are briefed on these efforts or coordinating them. A person familiar with Witkoff's thinking said the envoy is confident that any settlement with Russia would benefit America broadly, not just a handful of investors. Witkoff, who hasn't traveled to Ukraine this year, is set to visit Russia for the 6th time next week and will again meet Putin. He hasn't visited Ukraine at all, and yet he's been to Russia 6 times. And he's the one that is essentially writing the future of Ukraine. He insisted he isn't playing favourites. Quote, Ukrainians have fought heroically for their independence, said Witkoff, who has tried to inspire Ukrainian officials with the idea of soldiers disarming to earn Silicon Valley scale salaries operating American-built AI data centres. Quote, it is now time to consolidate what they have achieved through diplomacy, he said. So this idea that, hey, you guys stop war, and if you stop war, you can all go and work in these big data centers in Ukraine that we're going to build, and you can make huge salaries. Who cares about war? You can lose Donbass, it doesn't really matter. You soldiers can make some nice money over here. Thank you very much. Again, complete lack of empathy. Quote, the Trump administration has gathered input from both Ukrainians and Russians to formulate a peace plan that can stop the killing and bring this war to a close, said White House spokesperson Anna Kelly. As the president said, his national security team has made great progress over the past week, and the agreement will continue to be fine-tuned following conversations with officials from both sides. So on and so forth. Let's find a little bit more later on in this. We've heard from that bit. Kirill Dmitriev, there's talk about him, obviously, being an investment banker with degrees from Harvard and Stanford. He is clearly going to have his own idea about how this should go. And there's no surprise that him and Witkoff have hit it off. My goodness. Dmitriev arrived at the White House on April the 2nd and presented a list of multi-billion-dollar business projects the two governments could pursue together. At one point, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Dmitriev that Putin needed to demonstrate he was serious about peace, but Dmitriev felt his business-like rapport was breaking through. Quote, we can transition investment trust into a political role, he said in an unpublished interview that month. So, yeah, that is where it's all going, isn't it? It's all business rather than the pursuit of a just peace for Ukraine. American and Russian, it says later, American and Russian leaders were quietly anticipating that Witkoff and Dmitriev would deliver, positioning their companies to profit from peace. In secret talks, ExxonMobil senior vice president Neil Chapman met Rosneft boss Igor Sechin, Putin's former private secretary, in the Qatari capital Doha to discuss Exxon's return to the massive Sakhalin project, an investment stranded after Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Exxon billionaire investor Todd Burley and others have explored buying assets owned by Lukoil, Russia's second largest oil producer. The US sanctioned Lukoil in October to increase pressure on Moscow, prompting the company to put its overseas assets up for sale. Elliott Investment Management eyed buying a stake in a pipeline that carries Russian natural gas into Europe. More recently, Kremlin-linked businessmen Timchenko, Kovalchuk, and the Rotenbergs have been offering US counterparts gas concessions in the Sea of Okhotsk, as well as potentially 4 other locations, according to a European security official and a person familiar with the talks. Russia has also mentioned rare earth mining opportunities near the massive nickel mines of Norilsk and as many as 6 other Siberian locations that are still unexploited, these people said. Beach, Trump Jr.'s college friend, was in talks to acquire 9.9% of Arctic LNG project with Novatek, Russia's second largest natural gas producer, which is partly owned by Timchenko, if the US and UK remove sanctions on it, according to drafts of contracts reviewed by the Journal. In a statement, Beach said that the partnering with Novatek would, quote, strongly benefit any company committed to advancing American energy leadership. And that his company, America First Global, quote, actively seeks investment opportunities that strengthen American interests around the world. He said he, quote, has never worked with Steve Witkoff, but is extremely grateful for the efforts Witkoff and others are making to end the war in Ukraine. Trump Jr. has told people he isn't doing business with Beach. Meanwhile, Lynch, a Miami-based investor, had been asking the US government to allow him to bid on the sabotaged Nord Stream 2 pipeline if it came up for auction in a Swiss bankruptcy proceeding. Lynch, who in 2022 was given a license by Treasury to complete the acquisition of the Swiss subsidiary of Russia's Sberbank, had been seeking a license for the pipeline since the Biden administration. But in April dialed up his lobbying efforts by hiring Ches McDowell, a friend of Donald Trump Jr., he would pay McDowell's firm $600,000 over the next 6 months. Lynch's representatives reached out to Witkoff for a meeting. In late July, Dmitry Bakanov, the head of Russia's Roscosmos space agency, visited NASA's Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston, the first such visit since 2018, as well as the spacecraft manufacturing facilities of Boeing and SpaceX. So on and indeed so forth. So you get the picture here. This is a pretty controversial approach for at least as far as those supporting Ukraine and the Ukrainians themselves are concerned. This has enraged people who are supportive of Ukraine, such as Republican Representative Don Bacon. He's been very outspoken the last couple of weeks, saying Wall Street Journal today, multi-billion-dollar business deals between Russian and American billionaires that forces Ukraine to give Russia more land and make Ukraine a Russian vassal state. Greed trumps Ukrainian sovereignty. Churchill and Reagan are turning in their graves. And it's interesting. So there's a Guardian article out today, which isn't referencing that Wall Street Journal one particularly. It says the Guardian view on Ukraine peace talks. Putin is taking Trump for another ride on the Kremlin carousel. So the idea that Putin is stringing Trump along again. And I thought there's some interesting paragraphs in this. Mr. Trump is being strung along again, but the clear and present danger is that a combination of peacemaker-in-chief presidential vanity, a desire to do business with Russia, and Mr. Zelensky's sudden political vulnerability will tempt him to do Mr. Putin's dirty work for him. After 4 years of resistance, sacrifice, and suffering, Ukraine must not be bullied into a cynical carve-up, which would leave it permanently vulnerable to Russia's aggression, jeopardize Europe's future security, and inspire authoritarian regimes worldwide. Responsibility for ensuring this does not happen lies with Europe. Though Russian forces continue to make small incremental gains in Ukraine's east, their advance is painfully slow and at enormous cost. By signaling a commitment to provide Kiev with sufficient financial and military resources to resist in the medium term, European leaders can begin to alter the dynamic of the negotiations in the present. Whether such aid is to come through a reparations loan underwritten by frozen Russian assets from the EU budget or via common borrowing by member states must be resolved quickly after months of delay. A signal needs to be sent to both Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump that Europe will resolutely defend Ukraine's right to a just peace. As the Kremlin seeks leverage via the killing fields of eastern Ukraine and within the corridors of the White House, Mr. Zelensky must urgently be given some of his own. So unfortunately, we just got this situation where Trump and Witkoff and Kushner and others in that orbit just have dollar signs in their eyes. Marco Rubio is somewhat more old school, but he, because of his connections to Venezuela and whatnot, is going to be absolutely wrapped up in being hawkish over Venezuela. There could be a war developing like as we speak, as Trump announced today that the airspace over and around Venezuela is going to be closed. One assumes that they're going to start something on Venezuela, and that leaves Witkoff and others to go to town on Ukraine, to carve up Ukraine, and feed the pieces of Ukraine to Russia in return for Russia greasing the economic wheels or lining the financial pockets of these American billionaires. It is really distasteful. I think, as Donald Tusk put it so well, we know this is not about peace. It's about business. It's not about peace. It's about business. And that makes me really angry and not a little sad.